Really happy to be sitting with you here today.
Hello.
Right out of the box, tell me, what is your philosophy with beauty in the world?
It's so funny that you're asking this question, because just recently, this is like a little bit of a coincidence. Besides our regular clients, we started working with this service that allows people to hook up with you via your computer, via internet, just for like a quick design advice. So all of a sudden it becomes very sort of democratic and popular. Anyone can talk to you.
Yeah.
And it was something that at the beginning I was like, should we do it? Should we not do it? But it's actually a very prestigious thing to do. And I've been having kind of like an interesting time doing this sort of like 1 hour advice
Right.
outside from my real clients, from my big projects, let's say. And you really get every type of person, with like the most different questions about design. And initially I was like, oh, this is like not a good idea. But then, I said, well, if I have that capacity, I think the philosophy is do it all the time, do it to everyone, and do it equally. That's the philosophy.
What does beauty mean to you? It's sort of like that question, what is art?
It is in the eye of the beholder. I think, for me, a sense of harmony, a sense of like when things kind of work out and make sense. That's what beauty is to me.
And that's probably a little bit from your architecture background, where there's golden principles.
Exactly. I think I'm an interior designer. I'm a decorator. I'm not afraid of the word. So we do, rugs and upholstery and fabrics and,
Right.
But I was trained as an architect, and I feel like part of me will always be an architect. And the way I see things, and I think the way an architect see things, are more sort of, with geometry in mind, with like simple shapes, and always thinking about space, and always thinking about simplicity and common sense. I use these words and these terms, all the time. So that's kind of like, that's how I see things, and that's what beauty is to me.
So I'm thinking about how mathematical architecture is.
Right.
And sort of the beauty of math.
Right.
And then layering on top of this
Yes.
whole other
Yeah.
thought.
In the end, it's all math, right?
Yeah.
It's all math. I mean, there's an equation for everything. Like I said, everything has to make sense.
Yeah. So let's go back to your really early years.
Okay.
So your grandmother or grandmothers were serious artists.
Yes, one of them.
One of them.
Yeah, yeah.
And your father was not just an industrial engineer, but he was in that 1960s, 70s major.
Exactly.
Major.
Incredible. Yeah, so it's definitely something that runs in my family, right? So whatever it is, I inherited it, and I think it's expressed differently, in my family.
Right.
My grandmother was a classically trained painter. She could paint a Leonardo, if she
Right.
wanted. It was that kind of skill, that kind of level. And my dad is the ultimate kind of mid-century designer, but very kind of like part of the sort of like, macho heterosexual design world of the 60s and the 70s. It's like boats and cars.
And he's a race car driver himself.
Exactly.
Right.
Has like 4 bikes, and like, 3 cars. And and obviously it expressed differently in
Right.
me. I mean, originally I wanted to be an industrial designer like my dad as well. And he kind of convinced me to study architecture because it was much more, wide ranging and encompassing. And he was right, and I started my career as an architect and then became a decorator, so that's my expression.
But as a kid, kids are playing soccer in Brazil. We all know that because we see it on television.
Yeah.
You're playing with a sketchbook.
Right.
And you're out sketching flowers and birds and
Right.
trees and nature.
Yeah.
And that's where you're finding your satisfaction.
Exactly. I was always like, a little bit off, like, I didn't play soccer, which is already a huge problem, in Brazil. So I definitely knew from the beginning that I was interested in different things. But it was something that my family sort of recognized as as a talent, and they wanted me to try to explore it,
Right.
in every way possible.
So you were lucky because you did have a family that understood
Right.
your passion.
Right.
What would you say to people who are feeling like, I have this passion, I have this dream, I'm not being understood? What would you say to the parents of kids who are having a different dream?
That's a super interesting question, and because I feel like you come to a point where you really understand that your parents did everything that they could to help you, whether they were helping you or not. If I would say anything, and I think this is a conversation that I've had actually with my parents, um, if I could say something, or if they could do something again differently, is not think about themselves so much and not think about what they think is the right thing. It's really about, shedding that layer, and whether you understand your kid's talent or not, support it. Whether you see it or not, whether you see a future in it or not. It's so funny. Even though I was an artist, like a kid who was more of an artist than a race car driver, my dad's always, his number one preoccupation was the business aspect of it. Are you ever going to be successful being an artist? Are you ever going to be successful being a designer? Even him being one himself. So it's not so much about, oh, don't do that. It's like, I want you to be okay. And I want you to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is really interesting because I think it's not just parents and children, but so many people not looking at others through their own lens, but looking at the person for the person
Exactly.
and trying to help bring out those gifts of the person.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't have kids, so I can't say it from the perspective of a parent, but I imagine that that's the thinking. You kind of just want to protect.
I've had the good fortune of working with you for maybe a year, and I would say that one of your secret sauces is your ability to listen, not putting it through your own filter, but really truly listening to what someone else's thought or desire or sensibility is.
Yes.
And is that something you honed, or is that a natural gift?
No, I think it's something that, well, I think maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit of both. I'd like to imagine that I'm a good listener, but it's definitely something that I learned working in design and working in residential projects and working with individual clients. That is the job. You are really given a gift of working with people and designing their environments. That is the biggest gift, right? So you take care of it, and you respect, and you respect it. And part of the job, and a big part of the job, is listening. It's not so much as we are designers and we want to leave a mark, and we want our style and our portfolio to show and to generate buzz and and create a look or whatever, is only, in my mind at least, is only about channeling the client, is only about creating what the client desires, how the client wants to live, how the client wants to to use their space. It's all about that.
I had never thought about this, but in corporate America, it's very easy to measure the success you're having for a client. If you're in finance and you're running their portfolio, then it's what they're making on their investment. But how do you measure the success of what you've created for a client? It's really nebulous, right? I mean, it's their happiness. It's their comfort level.
That's it. Every client is different, and every relationship is different. Some clients we're closer with, some clients we're not so close with. Clients express themselves in different ways. But I think after doing it a few times, you kind of get the sense when you say, okay, we did good.
What's the measure of the mark? Is it the client satisfaction, or is it more?
No. I mean, it starts there. I mean, whether I like and whether my team likes what we did or not, it's secondary. Obviously, there's an interest in, oh, I love what we did there, and I'm really proud of what we did.
Right.
But it almost doesn't make sense if the client is not behind it. It's always the client.
So let's go backwards, because understanding and really being committed to a client's happiness, I think somehow goes back to yourself. So let's go back to, I find it very interesting that you're in Brazil, but then you end up in America in a very strange place as a high school student.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
We were always, traveling and seeing the world. My Brazilians, like Americans, are immigrants, right? So I am half Portuguese, half Italian, kind of like an international family. And it was just part of our education to travel. You have to see places, you have to go here and there, blah, blah, blah. And so it felt like kind of like a natural desire and experience to have this sort of exchange student experience.
The exchange student experience.
Right, which I was kind of like, I was a kid growing up in Brazil listening to American pop music and film, and I was like, I want to like go live in this place and want to have that experience.
Right.
So we organized, and my family was behind it, and I went to do this program, and they said you sign up for this program, and then they'll send you somewhere.
Yeah.
And they sent me to Illinois, to the middle of the country, to live with farmers, real farmers, not like and
Not gentlemen farmers.
exactly. And no, it was like the real deal. And so here I am, this transplant, this kid who was born and raised in this gigantic town, São Paulo in Brazil, very urban, very international. And all of a sudden I'm living with this, with
the cows.
Literally with the cows. Part of my job was to feed the cows in the morning before I went to school, and the yellow bus that picks you up, So for me, it was all a dream, it was like being in a film. But I also fell in love with the culture, fell in love with the people, fell in love with the country, and that planted the seed, this idea of maybe, going back to Brazil, finishing high school, and maybe there's a possibility of coming back, and doing university.
So we'll come back to university, but I'm curious, when you were in a very different physical environment, did it affect your artistic sensibilities?
It probably did. I don't think I was so conscious of it at the time, because there's so much happening, so much new stuff happening, so much to absorb. I think the experience in Illinois, those 6 months working on a farm, going to the local high school, it was more of a period of absorbing, understanding new environments,
Yeah. So you come back and it's time for college.
Yes.
And I think you made a deal with your parents.
Yeah, it was, they were... we're very close, very, very traditional. And I think that they were apprehensive about me just sort of leaving. In the end, there was a consensus, and they knew that that's what I wanted to do. And that, as hard and, as it was, and as much as they fought it, at the end, they decided to support me.
Right. Yeah. So you applied to?
I applied to a bunch of schools. At the time, I'm not sure, the process. I can't imagine how crazy and competitive it is right now. But I knew that I wanted to study architecture, and the most important thing was not only your grades, but, they want to kind of see your hand. This is a time where people drew.
Wow.
Right.
Imagine.
Exactly, right? And they want to see. So the most important item is your portfolio. What have you been doing, in painting, in drawing, in sketching? And I had a library of it. So that got me into every school that I applied.
Right.
Architecture also, some schools offer as a sort of a 5-year, B.Arch, which is what I did. But a lot of schools, you have to do 3 years or something else, and then you do a master's of architecture. And not many schools offer the 5-year program. Syracuse University.
Great school.
A fantastic school academically. Also a very different place,
Oh, yeah. Upstate
New York. I was accepted in Ivy Leagues and other super fancy schools, but, my dad was kind of like, well,
yeah.
Work a little harder. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's
he did not want you to have the easy path.
Exactly. The mentality was a little bit different. He wanted me to just work a little harder for things.
Okay. So you have your dream. You're coming to America to university.
Yes.
And you get there to architecture school. And what do you find?
A very intense environment. Syracuse, famously, is a sports school and very social, huge sorority, fraternity life. And very quickly became very obvious that we're not going to be part of any of that. The workload was insane, and all of a sudden you see yourself in a very intense academic environment with very serious people who from day one are telling you, is this really what you want to do? So this is the deal. Give it all of yourself, if not more, if you want to survive. The whole studying of architecture, the whole course of architecture evolves around this one course that we call Studio,
Okay.
which is really the practicing of architecture. So they give you a project at the beginning of the semester, and at the end of the semester you have to present that project. If it's a house, in Connecticut, you have to design it, you have to design the gardens, you have to design the interiors, and you have to develop this project and present it, and we did that every 6 months, right? And you kind of live in a single hall with your colleagues, and everyone has a desk. And that's kind of where you live. You spend most of your time there sketching and drawing and going to the library and bringing back books and developing your ideas and your mood boards and all of that. And that's kind of where we lived. And I'm not joking and exaggerating that most of us had sleeping bags, underneath our desks. And yeah, and maybe 3 or 4 days in a row that you never went back home. And that was the level of work that was necessary to deliver what was
They were saving lives. They were saving.
yeah. It was there was a very sort of, I don't know how it is nowadays, but there was a very focused effort from everyone around us, from the academic team to let us know how serious what we're doing.
Well, back to the Greek principles, I guess, of philosophers, doctors, and architects were sort of the top tier of everything, right?
Exactly.
So they upheld that.
Exactly.
And wasn't there a story that I guess would really surely put fear in your hearts that has to do with a quarter?
With a quarter, yes. So I did 5 years Syracuse, the
Right.
program, 1989. I started in 1989 to 94. The year that I started, the dean of the architecture school was this very, very famous architect called Werner Seligman. He was a direct disciple of, Le Corbusier and the most important modernists, of our time. German, very serious guy. And this is not a joke, I lived through this, and he would go to the studio, with some quarters in his hand, and he will walk around and look at our work and look at what we're doing. And occasionally he would put a quarter down. And the first time he did that, a quarter down in your desk, the first time he did that, no one knew what was happening. And then come back to the student and say, I think you should go call your parents because I think you should go home. He was kind of like looking over our shoulders, to see what we're doing, how were the drawings coming along, how was the program being developed, what were we doing. And then in his mind, he's like, okay, this guy doesn't have it. I better just sort of cut it short for him.
I think for some of us, it would have frozen any creative juice we had. What did it do for you?
Well, see, that's the thing. I mean, you think back and everything is just so kind of soft nowadays. I'm sorry to say it. But I think it strengthens you. You have to be able to turn it and make it into something positive for you. And he was right. My first year of work, I moved to New York. I got a job. I never left the office until 11:30, maybe midnight.
Right.
Got in at 8:30. There was no discussion about overtime. What is overtime?
Right.
You work weekends normally.
Right.
I mean, so he was preparing us.
Yeah. Yes.
So
Yeah.
no. It's I'm totally fine with it. Actually.
So for you, it was constructive, and it almost sounds like it did feed your fire.
Yeah, 100%. It brings you to that positive, focus and competitiveness, which is
Right.
which is necessary to have. Yeah.
So for people who are in these really, really tough environments, what would you say to them?
You cannot give up your dreams, and it is about persevering and trying and sticking with it.
Yeah.
But also be truthful to yourself. You have to know when to stop.
Are you your worst critic?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
And you have to stop yourself and say, wait, it's really good. I just have insane standards.
Yes, yeah, and I do that all the time, and I am very lucky that I have a great team, a great partner, who are as critical
Yeah.
as I am,
Yeah.
because I don't want a bunch of people just saying, how
Right.
great you are, but also, show me when my craziness is getting too much.
So you were very careful in some of your first jobs and really going for, I think, the people as much as the job, which we'll talk about, in creating your own firm. How do you find the right people and how do you know when they're right?
In terms of clients or in terms
No,
of
in terms of your staff.
staff, that is probably one of the hardest things. I've been working for over 30 years, so I've seen how my employers had to deal with this, and then we are 12 years old, independently, and that is always the most difficult thing, because it's not just about the person's individual talent. Our job, as we were talking earlier here in our chat, is there's so much that is personal.
Yeah.
And intimate, and it is about knowing to communicate, knowing to how to speak to a client, how to
Right.
speak to a vendor. So the job of a young designer is not just having great ideas, and having a great eye and knowing how to source and knowing what the cool things that are happening, because you can have all that, but if you can speak to the transport company correctly,
Right.
and make sure that they're behind you.
Right.
So the beautiful chair that you sourced
Right.
gets delivered, actually.
Right.
It doesn't work.
And there's so many steps just the chair, the sofa you're sitting on.
It's like, I always joke that the creativity is the least of what we do. The creativity happens fast, it gives direction, and the rest of the time is getting stuff done.
Yeah.
It's executing.
So especially in your industry, like sitting around the conference table with your colleagues, there's their creative sensibilities,
Yeah.
and then there's their interpersonal.
Right.
And I always think it's hilarious that you receive an application, you receive a resume, you bring them in for an hour, you run them through all the people, and they're like, yeah, they seem nice.
Yeah.
But it's like, how do you really measure? And you all are in a very intense relationship.
It is like a relationship. In the beginning, people seem completely normal.
Under the hood.
Yeah, exactly. And then, it's like, this is a great idea. Oh, amazing. And then it just takes time. It's always this balance of like keeping it professional,
Right.
but at the same time being close to people, but being close to people in the right way that, doesn't, it's one of the most challenging things about our profession is the team. It's always the team.
Well, and you have that other element that I think is somewhat like my dance. When we're performing, we're being judged by people.
Right.
When you're around a table and your colleague is presenting an idea and maybe you don't like it, that's personal to that person.
Oh, yeah.
What, you don't like my idea? What, you didn't like my dance?
Yeah.
So
it's so many layers, it's so many, yeah.
how do you deal with the different personalities as a leader of a firm? How do you keep it all flowing?
It's the same, with the clients. It's about trying to understand where people are coming from, so there's always a way of like, I like this idea, but maybe that's not right, the right thing for, for here.
Right.
That's a beautiful piece of furniture. I don't think it sort of fits,
Right.
within these other things. I think there's always a way of like of sort of making people feel good about themselves.
Feel okay.
Exactly. And I don't think like, just criticizing for the sake of criticizing, takes you anywhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's obvious to you, but it's surprising how people have different styles, right?
Right.
Because I'm sure you see it from the clients too,
Right.
who just say, I hate everything you just showed me.
Yeah. And and listen, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in my industry. And that's and I lived through a lot of that,
Right.
and I think that's one of the reasons why I started a little bit late, because it took me a while to understand that, you can be a professional and not lose yourself and not become a caricature,
Right.
There's so much associated with our business, that has to do with like extreme affectation and ego, It was always kind of like, how am I going to be able to be a professional in that field without becoming that person, you know?
And how do you do it?
It's a challenge every day because also you associate some of these traits with being more successful. If you're more bitchy, if you're more aggressive, if you put your foot down, you know, maybe people will respect you more, you'll be making more money. But I don't know. I still don't have the answer. I'm just trying every day to do the best design to keep my clients happy and to have a successful business.
You know, it's really funny. I was going to ask this later, but I've got to ask it now. So, you just landed, with a very notable figure on the cover of AD.
Yes.
You keep showing up on the top 100 list. You're everywhere. I mean, but you're still a regular person. You're still, I have to say, a very humble, down-to-earth, regular guy.
Right.
Is it hard as you're getting more and more acknowledgement?
I think it is. I think the answer is yes. It's a little bit hard because everything, the more attention you get, the more exposure you get, everything becomes more intense. It is a little bit of a challenge because all those things, don't come very naturally to me.
Right. Right.
I'm very much like my father. It's like I'm very happy at my desk,
Right.
sketching. Thinking about,
You're a little bit of an introvert.
a little bit.
What ultimately centers you?
Work centers me. My relationship with my clients, always puts me back in the right position. Get it together. Yeah. You know what I mean? You have a presentation in 2 days. Yeah. That always for me sort of like, puts me right back.
Yeah. Let's go backwards to your first job out of Syracuse, because in this day and age, everything seems so competitive. Right. Trying to get into schools, trying to get your first job. It feels impossible. And you were coming out of a field where there were lots of architectural students wanting, that plum first job.
Right.
Talk a little bit about how you got to Robert A. M. Stern.
Yeah. So it was very, it became very obvious to me, right off school, right off the bat, that I was exactly at the same position as thousands of other people, and hundreds of thousands, right? So I have a great diploma, from a great school, very little practical experience.
Yeah.
And I remember, and okay, this is a little bit of like the age, but I remember us like making copies of our CVs, right?
Oh, right.
So
copy machines.
Exactly, copy machines. So all of us is like, oh, let's go to the copy machine and like, and writing the names of architecture firms on envelopes and like folding the CV, putting in the envelope and sending that envelope out. And very quickly to me, I was like, wait a second. How is this gonna work?
Yeah.
How am I any different than anyone else? Right. So that was a very quick realization. So I did, started to think, okay, what else can I send? If I'm gonna put something on an envelope and send it to an architectural firm, what else can I send? So I started to kind of say, oh, if I'm going to write this guy, I remember this project that I did on my third year that I think they would like to see it. So I started adding to the letter, maybe some sketches, maybe some, let me show a little bit of my hand, I became very aware that I needed to stand out somehow. Robert Stern is very famous for these insanely beautiful watercolors that they make to document the projects, and they make the most extravagant presentations. It's very famous, like everyone sees these watercolors that they made. One of the years that I did at Syracuse, I lived in Florence in Italy. Wow. Through them, great program, and spent a lot of time just like, going around with sketchbooks, sort of doing watercolors, of everything that I was seeing. So I said, I'm going to send those. And I got a call.
Wow. Really, it's another version of listening. You were listening to who Robert A. M. Stern was, serving him what you knew he would love.
Right. Right.
So you got a great break and you go to Robert A. M. Stern, and then I think you end up in the model room.
Right. Right. They call it the model shop. You're a young architect and you're working for a big firm and you have to wear a suit and tie every day. And in your first day of work, they go, oh, you're the new hire. Right. Right. Okay, come with me. And they take you to this area where there's like 20 other guys, and everyone is just cutting strips of paper and cutting blocks of like clay. And all we're doing and all you do is is put together architectural models. So they have the drawings
Yeah.
and the volumes, and you have to read the drawings, and you have to construct the models, because they're going to be presented, they're going to be part of presentations.
You're in Lego land.
Exactly. So it's all you do. It's all you do. And then they kind of tell you, you're the new hire, right? Yeah, yeah. So it's like, oh, okay, this is great. And they're like, yeah, this is going to be like about a year here, So you think that you're going to be put in a project, that you're going to be drawing, that you're going to be like doing research and designing,
Really doing architecture.
Yeah, exactly. See, that's the thing. In every profession, in every design profession, the goal, what everyone wants to do is to design, is to create, right? You want to create, right? And that is like the last thing you do 20 years in, So, but that's the thing. You're a kid and you start working and you're like, okay, when am I designing? What is the project? When am I going to create something? And no. You're going to be cutting pieces of paper.
I could imagine for a lot of people, the balloon has just been pricked and you are out the door. How did you handle that?
Well, but that's the thing. It goes back to the professor, to the dean putting quarters on your desk. It's like you just have to toughen yourself up.
Yeah. Paying your dues.
Exactly.
Paying your dues.
Exactly.
So one night you're there very late.
So, right. We were there very late, as usually we were. And some associate partner walks into the model shop area, the model making area, very nervous, and says, can anyone draw? Can anyone create a sketch? We have a presentation tomorrow, and some stuff is missing, and we need some help. And I said I can help, and they got me out of that area and put me somewhere else. And this is the project. Can you do a perspective? Can you do a room? Can you do an elevation? And I just spend few hours sketching and created a bunch of drawings to be part of this presentation the next day. And then the next day I got called in to Bob's office, so I'm like, okay, it could be good or bad.
Wizard of Oz.
Exactly. And, so then he goes, oh, did you do those drawings? Did you do those sketches? And I said, I did. And he said, okay, great. So from now on, you're going to be working over here. From that day on, they moved me from the cutting paper, factory. And they put me sitting with an associate partner, kind of like an upgrade, and I had kind of like a
fast track
because, they realized that I could express myself in that way. And it was very, very useful for them.
So not just the right time and the right place, but the right skills.
Exactly.
So all three. So you're moving up at Stern, and then you decide to do a big break.
Right. So a few years in, I think I did 4 years at Stern, still very insular experience, spending 90% of my time at the office. But you're in New York City, so eventually, we get invited to do something, come here, come there, blah, blah, blah. I went to a fundraiser at MoMA. And while I was there, I met these other people that were working for other offices and other part of the industry. And then I meet these two guys that are working for Mark Hampton, who was a big decorator, a legendary decorator at the time. It will always be one of the greatest American decorators in the firmament, in the stars. And they said, we're looking for somebody. I think you'd be great. You should come meet with Mark. And I took the meeting, and I went to meet this big famous guy, this big famous decorator. Very skeptical, because when you come from architecture, you don't take decorating very seriously.
You look down at them.
You look down is almost like a heresy. It's like you don't. Oh no. Like it's like furniture is secondary. It's like if we only didn't need furniture.
Right.
He was a fascinating person. Completely convinced me and seduced me about the idea of going into interior design, and I decided to take that opportunity.
But this is a huge left turn.
Huge,
right?
Yeah.
Maybe your biggest.
180 degrees. Yeah.
Were you scared?
Yes, of course. I mean, of course. What's going to happen? I'm not trained for this.
Did you question yourself, or did you just say, I believe in the man and I'm following the man?
There was something I had never seen before in him, which had to do with when you come from architecture and the architecture academic world, and even like, in the practice of architecture, everything is just very serious and structured, and there's almost like um, there's no questioning of anything of like, real life and real experiences and lifestyle. Is like architecture is almost like a religion, and you kind of follow that. And when I met Mark Hampton, it was a whole world, that opened, that had to do with like beauty and lifestyle and how do people really live. It's not so much about geometry and light and space, but it's about real life.
I'm almost thinking it's like classical music is architecture, and then you move into jazz and jamming.
That's a great.
It brings a lot of emotion in with
Yeah,
it.
that's a great.
right?
That's a great comparison. Yeah, it's that. So even though I wasn't comfortable, I was just completely fascinated, to
Right.
explore it. Yeah.
Right. And how did you live with the discomfort?
In the end, the equation made sense. It is a new thing. It is a new experience, but I believe in it.
Yeah.
Because I think that, and I think it's true with any profession, you constantly have to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation. Constantly. You can never settle down. You can never be phoning it in. That's when everything stops,
Sort of like growth always seems to come through adversity. Like your accolades never seem to help you get anywhere.
No. You have to be in revolution.
Yeah.
All the time. All the time.
Yeah.
It can never stop. What was that quote? I think Martha Graham, the dancer, that's just a super famous quote. I'm not going to be able to say the quote, but she said something about that an artist is never happy. There's this sort of like unhappiness that keeps us going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because partly there's no defined end.
Right.
Right?
Right. Exactly.
Just like beauty. You can never say that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Right.
Think about that. What would the most beautiful thing ever look like?
Right. It can be the most beautiful thing now, like tomorrow will be something else.
Maybe it's more like what are the attributes
Right.
that lead to beauty? I don't know. So if you were going to go back and talk to your younger self, what would you say to that younger self today?
I mean, I don't know, or maybe like, don't torture yourself so much. I think cliches exist for a reason, and it's funny because when you live a little bit enough, you realize that it's true, but it is a little bit of that. It is about be true to yourself, believe in yourself, trust your gut. All those things are true.
And it's really nice when you meet someone who's extraordinarily talented and gifted as you are. And I don't say that lightly. And obviously all of your awards speak to that, but also that the person has the integrity and the kindness to back up the talent. And it's special and it's rare. And thank you for spending some time talking with me today.
Thank you. No, thank you, Robin. This is great. It's been great.